All right, let's pray. Father, this is the day you've made. We are glad and rejoice in it. I pray that you would help me to see ways in which I can help these students learn to think properly about participle use analysis, and may our time together be profitable. We pray in Jesus' name, amen. All right, beginning with number 15, okay. Actually, that reminds me, toward the end of the class, I need to get reports from you on your homework usage, homework completion. All right, so number 15, having entered the tomb, they saw a young man sitting at the right, having been girded with a white robe, and they were amazed. All right, Brandon?
Yeah, as parsing as second aorist active, feminine opposite.
Correct.
And the usage of entity.
Okay. So that means that first they entered, then they saw. Is that what you had, Sam?
It is.
All right. I would expect that's what I had. That is what I had. Okay, kathemanon. Sam?
I have present middle accusative singular.
Correct.
And the usage as indirect discourse.
That's correct.
Okay, so
What was your reason?
that it modifies young man and not they saw. And it's accusative, adjectival, not adverbial.
Indirect discourse is number 3 under 4C,
Okay.
predicate position. So it is a predicate position, which is generally considered adverbial, although
What was under the impression that A, B, and C, C1 through 6, were more adjectival, or I'm sorry, yes, basically C1 through 6 were more adjectival than with that, that adjectival aspect of the participle, and then, I'm sorry, 1 through 5, and then C, and then 6.
is the adverbial.
The back page was more adverbial.
Okay. Yes and no.
Yes.
Of course, number 1 is the periphrastic, and that's not going to be adjectival. It's just going to be verbal. Then complementary is also completes the verb. But yeah, I think you're right. Typically, they list. I think, doesn't Wallace place indirect discourse, and didn't the handbook put indirect discourse under the supplementary uses? We didn't put, yeah. Or did we put them under adjectival?
Oh, yeah. Indirect discourse is very supplementary.
Yeah. So, that's the part where I'm saying yes to what you said. I think I was wrongly thinking of it as adverbial. But again, here's my observation about indirect discourse in the New Testament. It is almost always a case where an action is being seen in process, a sound is being heard in process, or a result of an action is still in effect and is being observed. So in this case, they saw a young man sitting. They see the action in process. Okay. The other day, earlier in our uses, we had Didn't we have an indirect discourse participle with, number 13. Having heard them arguing. So what did he hear? He heard the arguing going on. And we said, okay, this is indirect discourse participle. It's in the case required by the verb akuo. But notice again the conceptual or the semantic situation. It's a record of an act in process.
I guess I thought that it wouldn't be adverbial because the verb agon is aorist active, and katemenon is present middle. I'm sorry.
You're right.
Yeah, present middle.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's masculine accusative singular and neon neston is masculine accusative singular, it to me like it was focusing more on.
I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah. No, I agree. No, I'm just trying to understand because because it seems to me like you were like so you're not saying that it's I guess in some sense though it's still clarifying the verb, right?
Well, it's related to the verb grammatically because it's modifying the verb's object.
Okay.
It's not telling when the seeing took place. And so in that case, it's not technically adverbial. But, and I guess I shouldn't even use the conjunction, but my point in my description of what indirect discourse looks like is I want you to understand the concept of indirect discourse with a participle so that you have a feel for when it will be used and are not simply relying on grammatical clues. When an action is being perceived in progress, that's when a Greek is going to use this construction. Yeah. All right, and then the third participle there, peribleplemenon. Brandon?
I have perfect passive masculine singular accusative.
Okay.
And the usage as attributive participle.
Modifying what word?
Modifying and
All right.
masculine singular accusative, masculine singular.
Now, it does agree in gender, number, and case, and determination. And so you could argue that it was attributive. Okay. However, kathemenon also agrees in gender, number, and case, and determination. But it was an indirect discourse participle. Did you identify it as indirect discourse or as attributive?
Attributive.
Okay. So, grammatically, your analysis is acceptable. Conceptually, you didn't have this information that I just explained about when indirect discourse is used and what it is. And I think had you had that information, that would have helped identify kathemenon as indirect discourse. And then lean you toward indirect discourse with parabiblemenon because it has the same relationship to neoniskon that kathemenon does.
They saw him having been girded.
Yeah, they saw him clothed.
Or the result of action.
Yes, they saw him with the result of clothing still In effect, he's got his clothes on. Okay? So, kalos, no. No, it's indirect discourse. Well, I don't think you should feel bad about getting a grammatically correct answer. There just happen to be two grammatically correct answers here, and when we've got two grammatically correct answers, then we adjudicate on the basis of semantics.
I think I'm making a bad assumption because I agree about the termination, but at the same time, I don't like to think of attributive unless there's an article present.
Yeah, bad assumption. There's no reason not to have indefinite attribution. Yeah. Okay, number 16. Give to everyone who is asking you, and from the taking away your things, do not ask it back. From the one taking away your things. Okay, Sam?
Present active, masculine, dative, singular.
Correct.
And I have usage as a predicate modifier. And the reason I have that is let me find the word I wrote down actually. Concept. It seems like it's an adjective, but it's functioning as either a noun or pronoun.
Okay. All right, what did you do, Brandon?
I have attributive participle.
And you have it modifying what?
I think,
Ponti?
yeah.
Okay. So, just out of curiosity, Sam, what made you go with predicate modifier as opposed to attributive?
Probably because of what I just told you.
What you just said? Okay. It's fine. I don't think either answer is correct. I think the correct answer is that we have a substantive participle functioning as the indirect object, which is modified by Ponti as an adjective would modify any other substantive.
Okay, I got lost there.
Okay, so itunti is functioning as a substantive participle. That means it's functioning as a noun. It's dative because it's the indirect object. Give to the one asking you. And Ponti is an adjective which modifies that substantive. I don't think there's any case where pos functions as a substantive and then is modified by an attributive participle. It's always the other way around. The participle functions as a substantive and is modified by pos. Okay.
So really, the participles applying the person.
Correct.
Right?
That's correct. Mm-hmm. Now, I am sympathetic. I'm particularly sympathetic to the attributive participle analysis because it's the reverse of what I just said. Right. It's just looking at which one is substantive, and if pos is substantive, then the participle is attributive.
Okay, we're looking at the second verb in number 16, Luke 6:30, irontos. So you should have parsed it as a present active masculine singular genitive participle as the standard third declension genitive singular ending. It has an article in front of it, which suggests that it's a substantive participle, since there's not any other word in the sentence with which it agrees in gender, number, and case. So from the one taking away the belonging to you things, do not ask it back. So the usage is substantive. Basically, anytime you have a participle that is following a preposition, and in the case that the preposition requires its object to be in, you're looking at a substantive participle if there's no word with which the participle can serve attributively. Okay, number 17, Luke 9:25. Here we have three participles, kerdesos, apollesos, and semiothese. All of them are aorist. They're all masculine singular nominative. The first two are active, the last one's passive, so aorist active, masculine singular nominative. The same here, and aorist passive, masculine singular nominative. They are one of two things. They are either attributive, agreeing in gender, number, and case with anthropos, as well as determination, since anthropos is indefinite, or they're adverbial, modifying ophileta. Both analyses are acceptable. As you can see over here, you can see that Wallace actually prefers the conditional analysis, so that's how he identifies it. And I'll show you quickly what Randy Leedy does with this in his New Testament diagrams. Let's see, bring that down in the screen. There we go. For what is a man profited, having gained the whole world, but having lost himself or having forfeited himself? So Leedy identifies these as adverbial, telling something about the verb. So he's going to be taking them as a conditional, as well as does Wallace. And if we take a look at our English translations, the NASB, the King James, the ESV, the Lexham English, the Christian Standard New Living Translation, and even the Net Bible, all go with the conditional understanding. So, coming back to that use, even though the participles agree in gender, number, case, and determination with the word anthropos, they can also be read as adverbial, something like this. If, having gained the whole world, but having lost or forfeited oneself, then what is a man profited? Or, conditionally, a man who has gained the whole world, but has forfeited or lost himself, what is he profited? Either of those options are valid.
Acts 7:12. But Jacob, having heard grain being in Egypt, he sent our fathers there the first time. Okay? So the kernel of the sentence is Jacob sent our fathers. That's the kernel. The verb sent is a verb of motion. So there's always the possibility that the participle could be purpose. But he didn't send them for the purpose of hearing. So he didn't send them for the purpose of their being wheat. So I eliminate both of those. Did he send so if I parse the participle, it's aorist active masculine singular nominative. The bullets under the parsing, none of them apply. Find the participle's referent. The referent is Jacob. It does not agree in determination because Jacob is definite. Therefore, this is a predicate position participle. It's not periphrastic complementary, nor is it indirect discourse. It can't be a predicate adjective, nor can it be a predicate modifier. So it's adverbial. As an adverbial question, participle, I would say it is cause, grounds, because he heard, he sent.
Now, I understand grounds is like a justification. Is that wrong? That's the reason I didn't.
Did you do cause reason?
Yeah.
Oh, that's fine. I don't care what you choose.
I have a note here.
Saying cause is good enough. Go ahead.
Okay, I have here, I didn't think it was cause, grounds, or reason, because the reason he sent wasn't because he heard, but because they needed grain. And their need...
Yeah, but he wouldn't have sent him to Egypt if he hadn't heard that there was grain. Just because you need doesn't mean you act. What if there was no grain anywhere?
They wouldn't be sent anywhere.
Right, yeah. So why did he send them to Egypt? Yeah. So maybe you were...
I didn't take the Egypt part, maybe.
Yeah.
I just took the...
Why did he send? Well, I don't think that's enough information to adequately process what happened. It says that he sent our fathers the first time. So if you didn't think it was cause, what'd you put?
Antecedent.
Having heard, he said, that's okay. First he heard, then he sent. I do think that there's a causal relationship here. It was because he heard there was grain in Egypt that he sent them there.
That he needed, I think, makes more sense.
Yeah. Okay. Although the reason I wouldn't say reason, Sam, is I don't think the act of hearing triggered the sending. It wasn't what, I stick out my foot and you trip. Why did you trip? He stuck his foot out. I triggered the action, and that's what I mean by the reason. And so that's why I use grounds. It's not simply justification, it's also basis.
Do you say cause ground?
Yes. The basis for sending them was he heard there's grain in Egypt.
Why isn't it the reason he sent them again?
Yeah.
Because he heard?
Yeah, I know. Help me come up with a better term than reason. For what term do we want to use for I stuck out my foot and tripped him? Why did you trip? He stuck his foot out.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's part of my problem. I can't figure out another term. I can tell you tend to think of reason in terms of purpose, and I'm thinking of reason in terms of cause. What was the reason you tripped? Well, he stuck his foot out. That's why I tripped.
Well, I hope I don't think of reason in terms of purpose.
Well, not only. I'm not saying only of. But every time you ask that question, I feel like, well, yeah, reason doesn't seem to fit, does it? And then I say, well, what does fit? I don't know what else to call it. So if we can find a more felicitous term, we'll all be happy. Onta. Ontav's parsing is present active, masculine singular accusative. No, I take that back. It's got to be neuter, plural. Accusative, neuter, plural, accusative.
How did you tell which one? I have both. I don't know. I don't know which one to choose. Because is the reason why you chose grain is a singular plural? Grain bean?
Well, Sitia is, I think, from Sition. Sition is the neuter singular, so Sitia has to be neuter plural. Let's find out if I'm right, so I'm not blowing bubbles here. The reference for that's Acts 17:2? 7:12. My cursor is there. Sition, ta, grain. So this is neuter accusative plural. Now the question is, how did they know that it was accusative? Well, I think the answer to that is they knew that the participle was indirect discourse, and indirect discourse participles are always accusative. Well, they know it's indirect discourse because it's the object of the verb heard, which is a verb of perception. And you would never have a nominative as the object of akuo. You would only have an accusative. So it's got to be accusative from that standpoint. So let me walk you through what I'm doing here. I found the kernel. The kernel is still Jacob sent. Questions about the main verb. Is it a verb of perception? Well, the main verb is not a verb of perception. Not a linking verb, not an intransitive verb. Okay, we've parsed the participle, present, active, neuter, singular, nominative or accusative at this point. Find the participles referent, clearly Sitia. It agrees with it in gender, number, and case, and determination. So, attributive, right? Well, that's certainly possible. But if it's attributive and it's nominative, what's it the subject of? And if you say it's not nominative, but it's accusative, then what's it the object of? And if it's the object of a verb of perception, that's probably indirect discourse. For a participle to be the object of a verb of perception, then I'm expecting indirect discourse. He heard there is grain in Egypt. Let me run through that again. I was unsure about whether it was nominative or accusative. If I say it's nominative, I have to make it the subject of something. It's not the subject of any verb. Therefore, I'm saying it's accusative. If I say it's accusative, I ask, of what verb is it the object? It's not the object of the main verb, sent. He didn't send wheat. Okay. He sent our fathers. So what verb is it the object of? Well, it must be the object of akousos. Akousos, I immediately recognize as a verb of perception. And then I say, oh, verb of perception, accusative participle, classic structure for indirect discourse. And if I can choose indirect discourse over the top of attributive, I will every time. Um,
Did you buy it?
I'm trying to avoid humorous answers and think of a real answer. I think as a Greek student in grad school, you always chose the snazziest use. Avoid plain Jane uses, if possible. But that's really not a good reason. Well, I ask myself, if this is attributive, wheat that was, there ought to be a predicate. Okay, he heard wheat that was. That's how we would translate it if it's an attributive participle. He heard wheat that was what? There's no predicate nominative, predicate adjective in the sentence. Okay. Are you clear on why that's how we should translate it?
I think I'm following.
Okay. We always translate attributive participles with who or that, depending on whether it's nominative, whether it's masculine, feminine, or neuter. This is neuter, so we're going to use that or which. Anta is from a me, so, and it's past time, so it's was, that which was, wheat which was. Wheat which was what? So that doesn't make any sense. But if I choose the indirect discourse use, he heard wheat being in Egypt. He heard there was wheat in Egypt. So the direct discourse is there is wheat in Egypt. The indirect discourse is he heard there was wheat in Egypt. So I've worked through both options, translated them out, found the attributive option not to make sense with what's in the sentence. The indirect discourse makes sense in the sentence, and so that's why I go with indirect discourse.
Okay, so attributive doesn't have a predicate modifying it, is that right?
Well, your classic case of an attributive participle would be, like the coming kingdom. He erkemene vasilia, the coming kingdom, or the running man, ha-anthropos ha-trechon, the running man. I guess we could ask the question, is there ever a time when a participial form of a me functions attributively? You have to have some kind of like a noun clause functioning as the subject. The God who is speaks. Atheos haon. Atheos haon lali. And so in that case you would have an attributive form of a me functioning, the God who is, modifies God, and the whole phrase then is the subject of the verb speaks. But it would be really unusual to have a me functioning attributively. Yes?
So if I remember an earlier conversation this year, this semester, didn't we say that the semantic meaning of something being attributive is equal to the semantic meaning of something being a predicate of some type, even though the grammatical meaning of something being attributive is not the grammatical meaning of something being predicate?
We did say that.
So are we predicating ontology? Is that sort of the idea? Like,
The God who is? Yeah, I think that's what's being predicated. Existence is being predicated. Even in an attributive construction. He is there and he is not silent.
I had predicate modifier because I recognized it wasn't modifying the main verb,
Mm-hmm.
but I also thought that it wasn't the participle, but
If you,
towards the brain.
okay,
And-
let's work through that. Keep going.
But then afterward, I put, then again, it is not. I mean, so I don't know what I meant by that. But from what I'm taking it, you're saying onta, how do you say that?
Satia?
Satia.
Mm-hmm.
Onta, satia. You're saying they together are, with the participle, are giving us indirect discourse, right? I mean, they're the object.
Sure. We'll back transform this construction into its original form. Okay, so we've got X, hello, 712. I was afraid that was going to happen. This is going to be so slow I can't get to it. All right. What? Can I beat the system? I think I can. Ah, got it. All right. So the phrase anta satia, the original is esten satia is igupton. That's the original sentence. Esten satia. There is wheat in Egypt. Then, the way Greek always does indirect discourse is it retains the tense of the original direct discourse in the indirect discourse, which is why anta is a present tense form and not an aorist form. Esten is present, anta is present. You always retain the tense from the direct statement in the indirect statement. Okay? So did you get it? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
I still feel a little fuzzy on that.
If I am sitting on this chair, I turn that into indirect discourse in Greek, I will use a present tense for the participle form of sitting.
Okay.
In English, we don't. We always shift the tense back. We say, he said he was sitting on the chair. No. Greek retains the tense of the direct discourse. So that's how you can always tell what tense the original statement was in, because the indirect discourse will have it. All right? You understand?
You said it retains the present tense, or did you mean the...
It retains the original tense. Okay, so you've got direct discourse. I need English. Direct discourse whatever tense is used here will be used in the indirect discourse form of excuse me. That's the way it works.
And that's how you got it then.
Yep. And this equals there is wheat in Egypt. They say, where'd you get the there? Well, English requires a there. We can't just say, is wheat in Egypt? But Greek doesn't require a there. They just say, is wheat in Egypt? And everybody says, oh, there's wheat in Egypt. Okay. All right. So then, the indirect discourse, not sure what's going on here with indirect discourse form is going to be participle in the accusative case, so anta is the participial form of esten, same tense. Okay. And of course, satia, because the nominative and accusative forms of a neuter noun are identical, there's not going to be any change in the form of satia. Although in my first sentence, satia is nominative, there is wheat in Egypt, it's nominative. In anta satia, it's accusative. Well, I don't feel like I'm making it clear, but that's the best I can do right now. So we're over time. I'm going to call it quits. We will have a participle quiz next time.